Okay, so this is version 5 of my Asteroids series of programs. I think this is probably going to be the last last Asteroids program, because I put everything in here that I could think of. So let's get started and look at what's been added, what's existed from previous versions, and let's just start by going through the different menus. One thing you may notice right off the top is the asteroids are different colors. That's selectable under the options menu. But to begin with, the game menu has the same features, the same list of options as the previous versions. You can start a 1 or 2 player game, you can quit the current game, or you can exit the program. Under the options menu, we still have regular and fixed perspectives, but we now have a choice between hyperspace and shields. The special saucer effects will give a funny special sound if you hit a saucer, and it'll also display the score value when you hit a saucer. Stars let you turn on and off stars. So with no stars, this background is solid black. With stars, you get little white dots randomly. I generally play without them because it does, for some odd reason, affect the performance enough to be a little annoying. This is the control for the color of the asteroids. So random color rocks is what we're seeing here, and each rock is a different color, and it's in a color range that's fairly visible during gameplay. This is the original setting where they're all just white. Everything is just in black and white. And there's a third setting where all of the little asteroids are blue, all the medium asteroids are red, and all the big asteroids are yellow. I generally like the random colors. I don't know, just preference. The adjustments menu have the same exact selections as in the previous version of this program. Basically, this controls gameplay, acceleration of the ship, and the number of bullets you can fire, how long a bullet stays alive. These are all defaults in parentheses here, or actually these are the current settings, but in this particular case it's also the defaults. There's a friction factor. If you put this at 100%, then as soon as you let off the thrust, you come to a complete stop. Maximum asteroid speed. I think this goes up to as high as 10, I believe. Yes, so that's ridiculously hard if you ever set that. Explosion duration and size is these little white dots. These two functions control that, how big they get and how long they last. If you change any of these from the defaults, then that disables high scores. So if you want to play for a high score, you need to come down here and click reset standard settings and say yes, and that will set the game up to where high scores will be enabled again. Under the controls, you can specify the keyboard controls through an interface representation of the arcade game control panel. Use the mouse. You go over any of these gray circles, and like this is the left rotate, this is the right rotate, and so forth. You would move over and you would push the respective key on the keyboard that you want to set that control to. Currently the Z key on the keyboard is left rotate, X is right rotate, and N is thrust, and so forth. You can also do some game control stuff: volume up, volume down, mute the volume, mute the audio, pause the game, or quit the game. And after you've made your changes, you can hit the escape key or just click this, and it will update the configuration file so that the settings are remembered from game to game. You'll also notice now this section here, this is all dedicated to joystick. Yes, you heard that correctly. I've added joystick capability to my game. This is the first game I've done this to, but I do plan to go back and revisit my old games and add joystick controls in them as well. First thing you have to do is you have to set up the path to the joystick driver, if you will. In Ubuntu, which is what I'm programming in, the path for a joystick is dev input JS1. this is a selector, a file browser, to where you can select whatever you want, and it will take whatever you specify, right or wrong. It doesn't do any checking. It just looks for a path that exists, and it will add it to your configuration. I only have one joystick. I assume if you install a second joystick, you'll get a GS2, and if you install a third, you'll get a JS3, and so forth. I don't know for that for a fact, but since I only have one joystick, it doesn't really matter. JS0, by the way, is going to be the mouse control. So in this case, for my joystick, the path is dev input JS1. So you select the path through this browser, and then you say done. It's going to confirm it found it. It's going to update it in the config file so that in future games it knows where the joystick lives, and it's going to warn you that you need to make sure that the analog is set at, in this case is turned off, so that your settings will work properly. In some cases you may want the analog on. The right hand side of USB joysticks, if it has two analog sticks, will have an analog button that will be either on or off, and the right hand side, the buttons and the joystick are affected by that analog button state. So to set the bindings on the joystick, I have two interfaces. This interface is similar to the keyboard binding setup, where it uses a representation of the game control panel. You use your mouse and you move over any of the gray circles, and you specify, you actuate whatever button or stick that you want, or trigger, whatever that you want for that operation on the joystick, and it will map it. After you've mapped all of the different game controls, and also if you want to map any of the game related options, features like volume control and mute and such, you can do that, and then you either hit the escape key or you just close the window, and it will store those settings into the config file. A second option for setting the bindings is this, which is very cool. This is what I prefer to use. I'm going to clear them. First of all, you can see how the settings are. Every one of these gray areas, either circles or rectangles or squares, can be specified with a game control or system control. And in this case, for example, shield and hyperspace are mapped to the top bumper button on the left side of the joystick, which is these guys here. The top one is called the bumper, the bottom one's called the trigger. Same thing for over on the right side, you have two buttons. So if you want to customize your settings, you can reset it. You can use either the mouse, which is what I'm using right now, to drag over the controls to where you want it to be on the joystick, or you can use the joystick itself and grab them and move them over. It's not as nice as the mouse, but it's not bad. So I'm going to set I'm just showing you how I set the different values. I'm using the mouse now because it's quicker. Basically, I'm setting it to the same thing I had before, but you can set them to whatever you want. Start 1, start 2, pause button on the start button, mute when you push down the center joystick on the left joystick, analog stick, volume up on the right bumper and right trigger switches. So now I can hit escape or close the window, either one, to save the settings, or if I decided that I didn't want to affect the settings, I could just click this and it will discard them. But I want to save them, so I'm going to hit escape. It's going to initialize the joystick. So now I should be able to start the game with button 1 on the joystick, and it worked. So I'm currently playing the game with the joystick. So I can mute the volume. I push the center, the right buttons down to actuate the mute, and I can use the volume controls, which are the right bump and trigger functions. All right, so let me pause the game. I want to talk about the themes the themes are a carryover from previous versions. This is the normal theme. I can go to a Star Trek theme where that when I resume the game, this should turn into the Starship Enterprise, or Star Wars, where the player's ship is now the Millennium Falcon. So in Star Wars, you'll notice the audio has changed and the saucer has changed into a TIE fighter. The larger saucer is a TIE fighter, the smaller saucer is the Darth Vader TIE fighter. And gameplay is exactly the same, it's just slightly different sounds and appearance. So now if I want to go to Star Trek, you'll notice that the audio for the saucer is now a large Klingon ship or a small Klingon ship, depending on which saucer, and it plays the Klingon theme song instead of, oh, and it just blew me away. You'll see the explosion has changed too. So that's it. I can't think of anything. Oh, I need to talk about the high score tables actually. Let me quit the current game. So now there's five high score tables in this now. So game instructions have changed also to support joysticks. There's the keyboard settings. You can play keyboard or you can play joystick. They're both available. And it's just that now that we have joystick capability, you have to know what they are. To see them in the menus, you can go up to controls, and the keyboard bindings are displayed here: Z, X, N, space. And the joystick settings for gameplay are left, right, button 3, button 4, and left bumper. So the high score tables now include a 5th high score table or 5 total. Before it was only 2, but now we have 5 total high score tables. And the first one's a combined high scores only on valid games, though. A valid game, like I was explaining, depends on the options. The adjustments. If you change these from the default, then you won't be high score eligible. To reset for high score eligible, you just reset the standard settings. You'll get a message saying, okay, you can have a high score now, and so forth. So high score normal perspective with shields, high score normal perspective with hyperspace, high score fixed perspective with shields, and fixed perspective hyperspace. So a lot of changes in this version. Very happy with it, and really a big deal adding joysticks. Now remember, this is a scripting language. It's TCL, very similar to Perl in capabilities. And as far as I know, I'm surely other people have done joysticks. I just haven't seen it, and I didn't know how to do it. It took quite a bit of research, but got it figured out and wanted to share it. Hope you enjoyed the video.